Hello, everyone. We are live yet again, and this is one of my authors' chats of the week. And what's also awesome about today is that this is a release day for me, and it's for my fourth and final omnibus collection for the Guardian Speaker, which is my Viking Dark Fantasy novella series aimed for mature readers. And so this final collections has the last four novellas, which was the first time they are also now in print. So that's really neat, and I'm excited about that. And so, of course, I may bring that up a few times, but then again, it is my release day for that particular project. And okay, I see my co-host. I'll be sending the invite, and we'll get things going momentarily. Let's go. Hello, hello.
Hi. I'm trying.
Hi, I hear you. I do not see you, and I do not know how to recommend to flip that screen, but there is a way.
I think it should come up. Oh, why is it not doing that? Let's try this again. There we go.
Huh? There we go. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I like your posters in the background, your book covers.
Yeah, it's the one extravagant thing I did once I published. I'm like, I just kind of want something.
No, that's not a bad idea. For a while, I was doing videos and I didn't have my bookshelves in the background, and I was trying to come up with what do I do. So I have probably somewhere I've shifted it elsewhere in my office, but had come up with little posters. One trick I discovered though, if I invert them, when I do lives like this, they appear. And so that's what I did for them, was to do an inverted version of them for when I live stream, and all of a sudden people can read them. But they're, regardless, that smart thing, because it immediately says, oh, you're probably an author.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. And, it comes up on other calls as well where people just see that. And, like when I have my day work that I do and it comes up, it's enough to spawn a few questions. I'm like, more potential readers right there.
Exactly. So for anybody who doesn't know you, and I don't know if you're familiar with my live chats with authors, but I'll let you introduce yourself and what you write, and we'll just go from there.
Sure. So I am Ron Shaw, and the two books that I've written so far are Echoes of Reckoning and Broken Reflections. They are part of my Purgatory series. It is, I guess it would fall slightly into the fantasy type realm. Not sure. This is where I always struggle, is the classification of the books. They're fiction.
Yep.
I live in New Hampshire, so I'm New Englander. I've been here a good chunk of my life, but I did spend some time. I lived in California for a while, and then lived in Illinois for a while as well. So it's, other than that, when I'm not writing, I work in the tech industry.
Hey, that's pretty neat. And to have, let me try to word it correctly, to have both a creative brain and then a kind of statistical, mathematical, scientific side of brain, and work them together, that's a rarity, I find. There are a lot of people who are one way or the other, and there's not a lot of overlap. So that's pretty neat that you can kind of do both sides, have your creative outlet as well as, your current main business.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's switching back and forth can be challenging. Like it works out great to have that analytical mind working when I'm going into edits, but when I'm trying to get in that creative space, I've really got to separate out and make sure that I have enough space after work to do my writing, where it's like, okay, I've settled down and that part of my brain can go to sleep.
Yeah, because I'm a full-time author and artist, and because I'm always in that headspace, it is hard to kind of turn that brain off and say it's okay to check out. It's okay to go back into the real world and away from all the worlds that I've been writing and developing and world building, etc., and so on. But it can be challenging. So with your series of fiction books, what was it that inspired you to decide, I'm going to actually just sit down and write a book? Because not everybody does that. And then there are a lot of people who say they're going to, but they never actually do. So what was it that encouraged you to go that route?
I mean, for me, I've always wanted to write a book. Before I started doing the books, like when I was in high school, college, I wrote a lot of poetry, lyrics for songs and stuff like that. So the writing was always there, and I always had this desire, and I tried through my 20s to get some books going, and I would make it a couple of chapters and it would drop off. It wasn't until after, like right around the end of 2020, early 2021, where something just kicked in again. I'm like, I'm going to see if I can actually do this. And I think I managed to write about 70 pages.
Wow.
And then it got shelved again. It just, I hit a point where I didn't know what story was supposed to be. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to put that away for a while. And then I want to say it was 2023, early, like in January of that year. I wanted to write again, but I wanted to try something personal. So I took a story of like something, from my own life. And in a matter of like 3 weeks, I had almost 100 pages written. And
Wow.
I was like, okay, I can do this. I'm like, this isn't something I'm going to publish because there's just more information than I want to share with the world. But after I did that, I'm like, if I can do that, there's nothing that's going to stop me from going back and writing this book. And after that, I mean, it took fire. I went from having the 70 pages to having 350 pages in the matter of like 2.5 months.
Wow. Yes, I feel like sometimes authors or people who want to be authors and writers, they put so much pressure because you want that end product. You want to have that book. You want to hold it. You want to, share it. You want to do all the things. But there is a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves to get there. And sometimes I wonder if that pressure does discourage or kind of affects the creativity of certain writers when, you feel that kind of that voice in the background kind of.
Yeah, I personally, for me, like one of the things I go through this, I'm working on my third book now, and every time I start, I go through this where I'll start writing and I try to make it too perfect too quick. Like I'm searching for the perfect words, and I have to get myself out of that rut. So it's like I have to remember that first draft is just to get the story out. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be good at that point. It just has to be get the story that you have in you out. And as long as you're doing the writing, it will start falling into place. I think I fall into the pantser category where I really don't plan out books. I just kind of have an idea of what I want it to be, and then I start writing and see where the characters take me.
And I will just say, like, I kind of fall in between the pantser and the planner side of things. So I do enjoy when the story kind of takes you on the journey along with it. But I think there's a lot to say about that because it is an adventure for authors who are like that. You never know what's going to happen the next day. I did a little skit not a couple years ago. I've repeated it periodically, but it's that concept of readers are like, "What happens next? We're so excited for your next book," and then authors are like, "Yeah, I wish I knew."
Exactly. With the series that I'm working on, I always knew there would be two books. I didn't think there was going to be a third book. I thought it was just going to be two. But when I got done with the second book, as I was getting it, one of the characters just kind of kept resurfacing as I was trying to move on and do a whole different type of book. And this character just kept coming back, and I'm like, okay, she needs a book. So it brought me back into it, and it's one of those where again I struggled a little at the beginning, but then I kind of let her take over and tell the story, and since then it's been moving.
That's great. And I think, I mean, again, don't necessarily overstructure yourself. I mean, there are definitely authors who need that. That's great. But like, if you inherently aren't that way, don't force it. My first book was supposed to be a standalone. I was just using it more or less to get the feel of everything, learn the ropes, etc., so on, and move on to another series that I had been waiting for a while. And of course, towards the end of that book, I realized it's actually a 4-book series, not a standalone. Whoops. But that whole series did help me kind of come up and develop my writing voice and figure out how to do everything and improve and correct things along the way. So the idea now is each book and each series that I release going forward is hopefully going to be a little more efficient, a little, better. Again, I always try to challenge myself to improve, not just the writing, but how to market and sell the book too, because that's permanently going to be challenging.
Yeah, that is definitely, I definitely find challenges there. It's you're not just learning to write a book, you're learning to publish your book, you're learning to market the book, and there's just so many different pieces that go along with it, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out, okay, well, this didn't work so well last time, so I'm going to try this the next time. And I mean, from my point, like you said, I do try to make each one a little bit better with what I'm learning, um, from the publishing standpoint, writing standpoint, marketing. I don't know if I will ever fully understand the depths of marketing.
Some people are that, and it is part luck. I do think it's part luck, and there is a skill set to it, but there is a lot of luck to like get that to catch fire when it comes to that initial bump for a lot of people. But yeah, it's challenging. It is challenging for almost everybody, if not everybody out there in some way, shape, or form. But we all hope that we can help each other kind of get through that little bubble, whatever it
Yeah.
is, and then finally have it, your book be on the tongue of countless people would be amazing. But actually, so let's go back to your two books. What talk about the characters? Like who are your main character or characters in your first book?
So in the first book, the main character is a guy named Clay. He's just kind of your average type of person, except the fact that he's dead. He is not alive, and it comes right out at the beginning of the story to
Mm-hmm.
let you know that. And really, what the whole book is kind of his journey into um, purgatory, and learning and understanding what it is about it. But then it's also, I did kind of like, there's a slow burn love story at the beginning of it, because it's also about his relationship with his fiance Ava, how they met, and kind of how things progress. And you learn as well, and that spoiler for anybody listening if you haven't read it yet, but she's also dead. So he's trying to find her in this world and escape from it. And along the way they run into the angel of death, whose name is Azrael, and he kind of is that stopping point. They're trying to get away, and he won't let them.
Interesting. Well, I think there is something when people are drawn to the concepts of what happens after, and you have stories like dark stories like The Lovely Bones, where it's the interactions between the living and the ones that are kind of moving on, at least in that process. And then there was this movie, and I wish I could remember the name of the movie. It was actually pretty sure it was Robin Williams, was one of his darker movies. You know what I'm talking about?
What dreams may come.
Yes, What Dreams May Come. And it is that kind of,
Yes.
I thought that was beautifully done, but it is the process of the main character trying to transition, I guess, into whatever comes after. So,
So that was definitely an inspiration. Mathis, who wrote that, and I think he might have done. There was one other one he did like that, where it's kind of like in between like a life and that type of story. And then the other part that I used for this was also referencing back into Dante's
mhm.
Purgatorio. So kind of using those as starting points, it kind of shaped. And then I wanted just a different feel, a different look for kind of what the Angel of Death was like, because you always have the Grim Reaper type of thing. So I kind of took a twist on that, and then just the whole concept of what purgatory, this kind of world after, was like.
Mhm. Mhm. And yeah, I was gonna say things like the Grim Reaper and this other psychopomp category characters are again that they're alluring because they're some people treat them as terrifying, but they're not necessarily meant to be terrifying. They're meant to again the crossing over process, but to whatever is thereafter. So now that you have three books, are all the books I can only assume dealing with either the same character or different characters going through this kind of, like you said, purgatory to in between space.
Yeah, so it's kind of, it grows. So the first book is really focused around those three main characters, and then the third book, or the second book, expands into more. So it adds a couple more characters into it, and it goes into, again, spoiler alert for anybody out there that doesn't want to know, but at the end of the book, Clay, the main character, is able to make it back into the world of the living. And when he does that, he throws a lot of things out of alignment. And so that's the second book, is kind of dealing with the reckoning of all of that that's happened. Now it's like, okay, here's what happened, and bringing that all back together. But they're still fighting against Azrael, who is kind of have all these other plans going on that we didn't learn about in the first book, but he kind of hints that something more is happening, but in the second book we really see. And now the third book that I'm writing is really focused on one of the secondary characters and what happens after everything in the second book is done. So her story keeps going while the other one's kind of stopped at that point.
Well, I was working on writing, my current work in progress is the sixth book of a series, and I always like the concept of ripple effects. And what one character does in book one may even seem innocent, but then what are the flaws and how does this snowball into something actually not so great later on? And I was actually writing a scene dealing with one of these ripple effects, long-term ripple effects, and I realized I need to give her a win because everything she does, I even got to the point where she's just like, I can do nothing without it having some kind of bad effect. And I was realizing I need to come up with something where it's okay.
Yeah, you got to give them a win every once in a while.
Yes, because I was just like, okay, I've beaten you down pretty hard. I need to lift you up soon. It's not supposed to be that kind of vibe throughout the whole book series. Oh dear me. But no, it is kind of fun to play with those kind of concepts. And do you think is this series now going to end up becoming just a trilogy, or is it going to continue potentially unfolding in new ways, in new directions?
I will say for now it's going to be a trilogy, okay, but I never know. I could get to the end of this and something will happen. I do believe, at least from a writing standpoint, after this third book, I will take a break from the series because, and I'm sure you know this from writing the series, you kind of just need to kind of refresh the palette every once in a while of
yes, palette cleansers.
you write so much on one set of characters. It's just like, okay, but the third book now I'm just like, all right, I need a little bit of a break from these guys. And there's, I've got 6 or 7 other books that I'm working in my brain. And I'm like, all right, I really want to write one of these, but this one was screaming that it had to be written. So I went for this one first.
And that is something, because there are certain books that are like, I'm ready and I'm ready right now. The story is ready to go. And that is clearly a thing, because I've said this, I don't know anybody's been listening to these, especially this year in my lives. I've mentioned repeatedly that last year I did have a stumbling block. It's the one now I'm back writing right now, but I was working my way through it and I got about 10-ish chapters into it and I just hit a brick wall, and it was trying to tie up too many plot lines and too much was going on and I needed to step away. And I had another story, one of my other stories that's been waiting around. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to just write one of these. And I knocked that one out in about 5 weeks. And I was just like, oh, okay, I needed to do that.
that little bit of break in between, sometimes it's just, it gets you. And I think one of the other things I want to try, right now, these have been longer books. I also want to work on seeing if I can do some short stories. To me, that's a challenge. It's like one of those things where I can be very verbose when I write. So it's, how do I tell all of this stuff in, 50 pages versus 350 to 400 pages?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, because depending on what and how many words, you can, either novellas, novelettes, short stories, and even if you dare flash fiction, that is beyond me, but all bracketing, smaller and smaller. And I started doing that a handful of years ago, where I wanted to create shorter works because I do like the longer stuff, but I wanted to create shorter works for different reasons. One, to have more turnaround. Two, especially when it comes to the short stories, they're great things to give out to newsletter subscribers. And this year I started a Patreon, so I'm putting some of that up there as well. But just little gifts for people who are supporting you in different ways. And as you said, they are great challenges on how can you write a succinct story in this many pages versus your sweeping 16-book, 500-page each epic. It is a totally different challenge, and they're great to do. So short stories. I am trying to make sure I do a couple, 1 to 2, maybe if I dare 3 a year around that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's now I'm getting my toes wet and all this. Like, all right, I can do a little bit more of this, but that one, I know that's a challenge. And like shorter and to the point versus having all these chapters to explain what's going on. And also, it's great to give it out like that. It also helps create a catalog for you, of more
Mhm.
works you have out there. That's what I'm learning is, you know, my first book was slow on sales, but then I released my second book and all of a sudden my first book started doing better. And I'm like, okay, so each time I do a new book, the last one's going to do better.
Mhm. And that kind of is, I mean, there is something to that because people hear you release a book and they're like, wait, it's not the first one, so they'll backtrack all the way, and you build a new group of following, a new group. So it has this kind of like up and down, this undulating fashion throughout of sales. Which I mean, we all would love to be selling constantly the whole time, but
It's kind of like the writing is my retirement plan. It's one of those things where it's like, I figure if I can write one book a year or more for the next 20 years until I'm kind of at that point where I can retire, that's a decent collection worth of work that will still be out there and moving. And then I can spend my retirement promoting and writing.
there you go. That's absolutely a thing. And once you build a backlist, you can always again refresh it, tweak a cover, and just boost the marketing in different ways. But you spent that time and effort, energy, creating a piece of work that can be continuously sold to other people. And then if you want to get into the special editions, you can sell the book again to the same people who love to collect special editions. That's kind of what I really want to get into towards the end of the year. I'm working on trying to wrap my head around and gear up to do a special edition launch for one of my series, because I kind of want that a little bit of refreshing, and two, also have all the pretty things on it. When I say pretty, I mean like the sprayed edges and the foiling and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Stuff like that. I love seeing the books like that. It's the one thing I really wish that they had on the site, KDP site, is the ability when you do those to get dust jackets instead of just the laminate case. It's something about that. It's like, that's, you go into the bookstores and you see like, these big releases and they've got that. I'm like, I just want one book like that.
Mhm. Well, the company I'm looking into is Book Vault, and they do offer all the special edition stuff, and that's kind of what they're. It sounds like they're pushing more, but they can do just a little more basic print runs. If you wanted to sell authors copies direct, you could get one with a dust jacket through them too. Versus, I know a lot of other people use Ingram Sparks to do that, but I haven't dabbled with that yet, and I keep going back and forth. If that's because I would, in theory, want to take my print books wider than just selling direct and KDP, but that's a lot of work of getting like everything resized, set up, all that kind of stuff. And I just don't know if the perks make sense to use that company versus some of
Yeah.
the some
I
of the
mean,
issues people have.
I've put both on KDP and Ingram. Now I'm trying to actually pull at least my ebooks back from Ingram so I can. There's no traffic or sales really that I see from them on there. I get a little bit for the print books, but now it's like learning about Kindle Unlimited and all this other. I'm like, that's really where I want to get the books to go. But the only thing that worries me now is that where I'm in the process of trying to take these down, making sure they come down, because I've heard horror stories of what happens if they find your book elsewhere when you go to Kindle Unlimited.
Yeah, at least when you're doing that exclusivity contract
Yeah.
with them, and that is the downside of if KDP treated indie the way they treat trad, because trad can have it in KDP and be elsewhere. Only indies are, and maybe small press. I would have to ask small press, but I know for indies we are required to be exclusive to have that benefit, and that's kind of like, come on. we actually work really hard. Help us out a little here, but yes, there is a lot of benefits for people who, especially depending on your genre, who use KDP. I've kind of did the opposite, where I'm pulling it out of KDP and I'm moving them wide just to see how it goes. But we do have that benefit to kind of go back and forth and jockey around until we find that sweet spot for whatever it is.
Yeah, it's finding the right location and the right audience, and that I think that can be the trickiest thing sometimes. Is there's so many books out there. It's you've got to find where that audience is and what they focus on to get them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll always be changing too. For better, for worse. Always changing. The publishing industry. It's the joy of. But I know early on you were talking about how originally intending that this was only a 2-book series. Now you're going to try to complete your trilogy. Do you have an idea for what comes next? And if so, are you at the point of wanting to talk about what you think the next series is, or is this kind of I'm keeping it a little close in until I'm ready?
So I have one that I'm working through right now, and it kind of stays along the whole being not alive type of thing, and just where my brain seems to go when I'm writing. But this one is the one I'm kind of working through and getting ideas together on, is about 90-something-year-old man, and he's in the last days of life. He knows it's happening, and he's going through kind of seeing, they say you see people that passed away before you as you're going. So he's seeing each one of these people come through, and they're telling him it's time to go, and each time he's telling them, no, I'm not ready to go yet. And it's because he's got this feeling of guilt of something that happened before in his life that he's just hanging on to, and he's waiting for that person to come before he goes. So it's told of a perspective, kind of some of his memory, but a chunk of it is going to be through letters that he's written to his wife, and it's the hospice nurse that was taking care of him that actually has this. So the whole story unfolds as she's sitting at his funeral, and there's not a lot of people there just because how old he was, his little family remaining, and it's her kind of recounting and reflecting about his whole life. And then the big reveal at the end is kind of what this whole thing that he's feeling guilty about and why it happened.
Oh, wow. You like these intense stories, which is that's great. But I was gonna say, yeah, that's gonna be, I feel like, an emotional tearjerker too. It sounds like it's setting up for.
I like to add those. In the second book doesn't have as much of it, but in the first book, when I had some of my early beta readers, I knew when they hit a certain point in the book, because I would get 4-letter expletives to me text across, because I'm like, oh, you must have hit that point.
Oh man. Yep. But that's a great way to start marketing your book, because I have a friend who does something like that, and what he does is like, I can tell when you reach page blah blah blah, and here's a tissue for you or something. People are like, but what happens on that page? And now they need to know. That's a good way to pitch, and be like, make sure you have your tissues when you read chapter so and so.
And it's with the stories, like I said, it's definitely got aspects of fantasy to it, but I also like to make the emotions in people. I really want them to feel. To me, that is probably the most important part of the characters, is making sure that they're relatable, that everything that they go through, I want the reader to feel that same emotion as they're there with them.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, because that is one of the top tier, I'm trying to think of, that is like the peak of what as an author we want to achieve, is that connecting with a reader at an emotional level, whatever that emotion is, but you want to do it. And it could be all the emotions depending on what you're writing, but you want to connect to the reader at that kind of deeper level where they feel so strongly about your character in that situation. Because if not, it kind of becomes this shallow work, and you don't want that. So, but I do always appreciate when people can kind of jar me emotionally. I could be angry about it, but I also appreciate it, because I'm like, you did that, you did good.
Yeah, it's nice when that's the best feedback I can get. Not necessarily when people are like, oh, I enjoyed the book. It's when they come back and tell me like this one little part that's like, and they got what I was writing. They got that feeling. They had that emotion, and it's just like, thank you. That's to me is so much better than just, oh, I like the book. It's like, when you tell me, oh no, this certain piece in this chapter, it just spoke to me. It's like, that is what I was hoping for.
Yes, those feelings are amazing, and having people, take that time, energy to reach out to you, that means obviously your work has reached them on that level where they want to make that effort, because not every book is going to be that book to them. And so those moments are very special, and we hope to get a lot of them.
Oh, absolutely. And it's the other part of that for me. It's like, I think part of this learning is also realizing that your book is not for everybody. It's there is that initial excitement of when you start getting reviews. And there's also that nervousness that comes when you start getting reviews. Because some people are brutally honest in the way that they feel about it. Good or bad, it can, I'm lucky to where I haven't had too many severe pieces of feedback yet, but there's been some that are a little bit more critical. And I think that's just, you kind of get used to it as you go with more books, that some people are just not going to like it. I normally still say thank you, I appreciate you reading the book, and I'm not going to change it.
And that's something that each author has to decide, because there is a bunch of authors who will not read the reviews, and that's okay. And then there's people like me that I will periodically go through and look at the reviews and see what they're saying, but I'm specifically looking for trends. So if I see anything that's trending, good or bad, it's something I want to be aware of. So I'm like, okay, I did this right, or oh, I may need to kind of be aware of whatever this issue is in the future in order to not do it again if I really do view that as a problem. So that's how I approach it. But there's always going to be some kind of review come back, and it's going to be like, ouch, that one hurt.
And with those, I think you kind of, to the point you were making there, one of the things I do is I also go and look and see, if I get a lower review, I look and see how they review other books, because it's also dependent on how we look at it. If you get 3 stars from someone, and then you go and look in most of the books, they rate 3 stars, and it's not necessarily bad to them. It's just kind of their average rating cycle. So understanding a little bit more about that, and some of the ones that can get nastier, you look and see, and if they have a trend of nastiness with people, you go, okay, this is just their way of reviewing.
Yeah, and there's always going to be someone who has a bad day, bad time, and again, they may have picked up your book thinking it was one thing and it wasn't, and that's just their way of expressing emotion. The one I always use, which is, I laugh every time, I think it was like a 2-star review, and if you read it, it went on and on about all the great things about my book. And the last line of the review was, rated it as 2 stars because it wasn't a standalone. So here's the thing, you just can't please everyone, and that's okay. But I like using that example, because it's one of those, as an author, you pause, you think about it, you're like, well, I was never going to get that 5 stars from this one. It's just okay.
Yeah, there's nothing you can do for that.
It's okay. But it does put a smile on my face.
And it's still good though, especially in that case where they're saying all the good stuff, it's good to promote. And I mean, even myself, when I look at book reviews, there's books that I enjoy reading, and then sometimes I'll go take a look at the reviews, and I'm surprised that at the negative reviews, I'm like, really? Did we read the same book?
Yeah. But again, everybody has a different taste, and there are so many factors, and it could be just, the mood of the month for all you know. So, but yeah, reviews and authors, I mean, everybody has to decide how they want to treat them, how they want to do them. I think the most agreed rule of thumb is, don't necessarily ever, engage with a reviewer, especially one that has said something negative to you. But overall, it's how you look at it as an author. Either you can choose to ignore them, you can look at them. I like looking at trends in order to find anything that potentially I can improve on in the future if there is something trending in some way, but it's just the way of book world.
Yeah, I think for my first book, I was looking at it every day, and then as it kind of faded off and I got to the second book, then I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to check maybe once a month and see how things are going.
Yeah.
You just...
Oh yeah, sorry.
Oh no, it's just it's one of those things where it's the same as the ratings on Amazon. You see the ranking, and I was really bad the first book. I kept checking. Now I'll just occasionally look and be like, oh, okay.
And I'll be honest too. I'm a person that it takes me forever to get reviews. I know I sell the books. I can see the numbers, but sometimes it just takes a while to get them built up, and That's another issue for another day. Nothing else. Just another issue. Anywho, but all the things we think about as authors. But okay, let me ask you: how do you like to reach new readers? Because it fascinates me because there's so many approaches people can take, and everybody kind of has their own kind of comfort zone, what they figured out works for them. So how do you like to reach new readers? Are you someone who goes face-to-face events? Do you like doing the online marketing, advertising? Like, how do you find people?
I am an absolute introvert. So outside stuff, scary. Even just, I do the online. It's primary. I haven't found any events near me yet to do that. I've started talking to some people because it's something I'm going to have to get over and do because I do want to get my books out there in front of more people. And that's just a better way of doing it where, online, I think TikTok has been definitely the greatest reach out for me. There's just an awesome community here of readers and authors that connect. And, that's, I think, a good part of the people that have purchased and read my book have been other authors. So it's one of those things where it's nice to have that community. I do want to expand out beyond it though, and really start looking and see what else is out there. Also, I want to look to start seeing like where and how to submit my books for like different types of awards and things like that. Just to even have it put in there because, it just exposes it to more people. They'll see more of it out there. And even getting on TikTok was a challenge for me because video is kind of like a scary thing to me. I don't mind, having audio. I've done podcasts before where it's just audio, but having the video portion was like a comfort barrier that I had to break.
Yeah. Well, I always say that I'm an extreme extrovert, but even jumping on doing the video thing initially was a weird just change because it wasn't a flat image or a picture or things. It is now just a different kind of a little more personal form, which I think is one of the reasons why people like it, because it does allow people to really connect with the authors behind the scenes, and that kind of connection does also encourage the flip side where all of a sudden they want to support you, they want to read your work, and then they become a fan of your work, and then it goes in this kind of circle, which is great. But you're not the only introvert on here. I feel like the majority of authors I talk to on here, they all claim some level of introvert, and the extroverts are very few and far between, but maybe it's because a lot of them are out doing the face-to-face stuff. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? I'm trying to try it all. And I don't say I'm successful at any one facet of it, but I try.
What have you found to be the kind of the best reach from, at least from the online or
I was going to say Book Talk community is the one that I think I make the most connections, not only to readers, which is fantastic because, I love my book to be read by as many people as possible, or books, but also the connections I've made with the writing group, because knowing other authors and how much they're willing to help each other out, it's been amazing how many opportunities have unfolded just because I've got to meet people on here, and then down the line I've met some of them face-to-face at events or locally, and it's just really neat. Or if I have a question and I've now know someone to ask, and it's great because for years I was stumbling around being like, I don't know what I'm doing. Thank you. I don't know what I'm doing, and it's been a complete change joining this particular community. So online, I'll say this has been the best thing. There are new things that I'm trying this year, like created a Discord server, so trying to engage a little more in-depth, intimate engagement through that one. I started a Patreon just to see if anybody wants to jump on that bandwagon and see how that goes, but always trying to play around with different things each year. And if something doesn't work, it doesn't work. So we'll see.
How have you found newsletters to work for you?
It's always like I guess it all depends on how you view it. It's a little hit or miss in the sense of I can never really tell if they're necessarily selling. But the good thing about having a newsletter is, again, as we saw with Book Talk in the US, you never know if things like that are just gonna disappear one day. And so having a newsletter group where you have control of being in contact with those potential readers all the time is a good thing to have. But it's a lot of just talking, you know, in the dark, because they probably see you and follow you elsewhere, and that's really where they prefer to hear the news, but there's no guarantee that those outlets will always be there. So I like to have one of the things I'm doing this year to build engagement is I use MailerLite, and this is the side of our chat where it's going to be very author forward, but I use MailerLite, and they have a new version they launched last year, and part of that, they allow you to do some more engagement features. And so using their, what do they call it? Not querying, pretty much their questionnaire. They have a questionnaire feature on it. And so what I'm using that for is allowing my readership to create a story together. And so I do a line or something, and I give them 4 options. Everybody votes. And so next month, I will use the winning one to build the story out, add a few more lines, let them know, do another choice. But that's encouraging, you know, just the engagement, and also trying to just say, hey, don't forget to open up the newsletter and see the other things that's going on, because you might miss some notification of a launch, a discount, whatever. And so that does encourage, theoretically, people to check in however regular you release it. So that's another new thing that I'm doing this year. And it's only, since today is my book launch, this was my second time since I started that feature. So, but it's kind of cool seeing people's engagement with that kind of story building process.
Well, that sounds like a really, really cool thing to do.
Yeah, it took me a little while to wrap my head around. It wasn't my idea. I heard it from another author saying this was a great thing to do if you have newsletters. And I was like, okay, how the heck am I going to figure this out? It took me a while, but I did it because I'm determined. I will make things work. But yeah, you can be creative in so many ways for, you know, building whatever community you're trying to build. But let me ask you, since the hour is starting to speed by, there are a couple questions I always like to make sure I cover, because if this platform is nice, and 98% of the time it is, I'll be able to repurpose this video onto my YouTube channel and put all your content below so people can hopefully continue to find and follow you. But for everybody here, outside of Book Talk, where else are you? Do you have a website? Do you use a newsletter, other socials? Where can people continue to find and follow you?
So I do have a website. It's ronshawwrites.com. I am also on Instagram, Ron Shaw Writes, and then that's the main ones that I have. I've got other ones that I just don't remember right now, because when this app went down, I just kind of created a bunch and said, okay.
Hey, I think a lot of us did that. I know I jumped on a couple different ones trying to figure out what to do next if it didn't come back. And there's still that question, is it going to stay? So it's never bad to have backup plans.
So like I'm on that. I put myself on Blue Sky, but I don't remember. Like everything, if anybody wants to see visiting my profile here, they're all I think most of them are all listed through my link tree on there.
Yeah.
So I've kind of got the whole gamut of everything I added up on that.
So that's good. And that's, you know, I love those kind of link tree or link page functions, because it does give people that one-stop shop for anything else they want. Do you use a newsletter? Or
I haven't done yet. That's why I was asking, trying to get a kind of a take for, see if it's actually worth the time to do those, and kind of the response that people get. I mean, it's everywhere I hear like, oh, you should have a newsletter. I'm like, what is it doing? Anything?
It's just that kind of backup. It's a lot of times a backup of being able to communicate with people. And again, if anything, anybody who's book disappeared, they still have that connection with you. Some authors do have far better luck. I think a lot of us have far less luck in the selling, but again, it's that backup plan.
Having that connection.
Yeah, that backup plan never hurts. And it just, yeah. And as someone who may be on the more introverted side, and maybe just something that's a little more comfortable for you than trying to do some more of the YouTube or the BookTube channels and stuff like that. So you just figure it out. But yes. And then my other questions I have for you, my other and I see a question for us. I'll get to you in just 1 second. The other question I have for you that I like to ask is, where can people get your books? Because you were talking about KU and all that. So are they on KU right now? Are they still currently wide? What formats? How can people get your 2 books?
So not on KU yet, but all of my books are available through Amazon. And you can also get them on all of the other sites like Barnes & Noble, Walmart. I think the only one who never put me up on their site was Target, which I'm just disappointed with them. But all of those spaces, the books show up there. And then I have one, my next one. So this is outside of the series. I just put together a poetry book. And that's dropping on April 1st. That one will be on KU. So that's my first one I'm kind of doing as a test to put out there.
That's great. Book of poetry. I love that. Multi-talented people. I was going to say, I have this one project that, depending on if I decide to self-publish or do something a little more hybridization form for it, one of my ideas is doing a special version of it that I need to work with a poet to help me, because I am not a poet, but I have like this thing in my mind, and I was like, I need to work with someone to help finish this thing if it works out. So I might have to note you in the background, also poet.
Absolutely.
I'm writing it down. I always keep my notes. Except now I have like stacks of sticky notes that have spread across my office, and one day I will have to like spend a week going through them and being like, do I even remember what this is for?
Well, so I have a combination of notebooks everywhere that I write in, and then I also have like I do this. I don't know if you, with my books when I'm editing, if there's sections I have to take out, I have like a folder on my computer where I'll create a document and just dump all of the pieces that I take out, because sometimes it's like, it's not right for this book, but I might find a spot where I can utilize it in the future.
And I see a question that was asked. So will the tariffs in the US impact authors' worldwide sales? And the answer I have is, I don't know yet. I know when a lot of us use a print-on-demand companies like Zahn's version is the KDP platform. And because of that, they have multiple places to print around the world. So utilizing them, that may not have as big of an impact. I don't know for sure. For anybody trying to sign and ship things manually, I would be shocked if there wasn't some kind of backlash or issue cropping up, and I have to keep my ears open, because I want to be able to theoretically ship things worldwide, already knowing that shipping is so expensive once you leave our country. But there may be some implications down the line, and for things like, I don't know where all the paper in the US comes from. Right. And if they come across borders, how will that affect the publishing industry? I don't know the answer yet. It would be, I'm curious to see what happens, and a little dubious.
There could definitely be a challenge for print books. I mean, that's the advantage, though, with the EPUBs and having that ability to have those ebooks. It does help when things like that do come up.
And same with audio, as anything that's digital and it can be transported digitally does have a benefit. I do know certain countries are limiting when you're shipping book boxes to just books themselves, and not because they're trying to minimize extra loose extraneous paper. I'm trying to remember what countries have started doing this. I want to say Germany is one of them, but I don't take me on my word. But those are also things to be aware of if you are a small author and you're trying to send things out. Certain countries won't let you cross borders with bookmarks and stuff like that, because they're deeming that as extraneous paper waste, and they're trying to prevent that, encourage more of a green movement. So a lot of things to think about that you would never have thought you needed to do until you decided to publish.
The book boxes are fun. That has actually been one of the things I've enjoyed doing. I didn't do anything with the first book, and the second book, though, I just started putting both of them together and doing different package deals with them. And that's been fun. And I think it took off more than just trying to push and sell the book by itself. It's like, here, have some other stuff and enjoy it.
Anyway, I have one thing I have to pick up so I can show you as an idea. Hold on. So for last year's Kickstarter, one of the books, the book that was kind of launching through it, in it there were two letters written by one character that set off that were important through the story and some clues of what was happening. And you were talking about how one of your books you were thinking about having parts of it written as in letters, but if you did book boxes, you could always do letters, physical, obviously, have them in the book, but do something like what I did. And again, that's just a little fun, little creative additive to your book box that would be pertinent to your story, however the letters look like, I don't know. But, just fun little things, creative things.
I like that. Yeah, I keep trying to as I'm thinking about with the poetry book, I'm going to do another box setup with that. And it's just trying to find little things that I can add in. And with my last one, I had a friend, she does jewelry. So she made these beads that go along and they match the colors. So she did the background. So I've had one set that were purple and one set are blue for the two different books. So she's I think she's doing more of those for the poetry book. And then also I have another creator here from TikTok that is going to be making little pins with the book cover on them.
Nice. And I see someone in the comments saying, MJ says, Ron makes beautiful book boxes. So see, your fans are...
they're fun to do. Yeah, it's something, it makes them feel a little bit more special versus just here's a signed book from me. It's here's some other stuff for you.
Yeah, one of the things that it used to be something I really liked doing as a child and then kind of stopped doing was origami. And so one of the things when I do signed copies, I have a series of origami shapes that represent something in the book. So maybe a sword and sheath or a dragon. I just worked on some ravens because today's a launch day for me for my final omnibus for my Viking series. So Hugin and Munin, Odin's ravens, and coming up with things because they're just, again, little things you can tuck in. And they're just that little extra special thank you of saying, hey, thank you for supporting an indie author. Thank you for supporting and buying it direct. I appreciate you. Here's your signed copy. Here's a couple thank you items. So I do like that.
Congratulations on your launch.
Oh, thank you. I'm like the worst when it comes to launches. At least I've always been really bad for my novella series because being novellas up until in the last year when I finished that series, I was having multiple ones a year, so I just didn't have the energy, the mental capacity to try to build up. And I was like, no, it was supposed to be just a quick turnaround series, but I also bundled them and the omnibus versions. And so because it's a launch day for that, even though the ebook has always been out for all the independent ones, now the print versions of the last four are bundled together and out there. So that's the cool thing. Yeah. Yay, launch day! So this is my weakest. My weakest part is the launches. I do want to get better. My full-length books I've been doing Kickstarters for, and I do treat that as kind of that launch mentality. But for that particular series, I was just always like, oh, by the way, I've launched enough.
That's why I had to ask. I didn't even know what to do for launches. I'm just it's available.
There are so many people far, far better than I am because they do make the plans. They do talk about it for, some even people a year in advance because they are patient. And I don't know how you're that patient to wait.
Yeah, no, as soon as I get it and I see it's been created, I'm like, I just want to let it go. Even now, submitting where I did the poetry book and it's kind of there and it's sitting and I'm like, I had to pick a date. I'm like, all right, I've got to be patient and wait for that date, even though it's just a little bit more than a month. I'm like, that's still a long time, and I just want to start selling.
Oh, no, I get you. I definitely get you. It's going to be a very different year for me because I'm used to having multiple releases because as a benefit of doing that novella series while I was simultaneously releasing my YA one, I don't necessarily recommend doing two at once. I did. I still kind of do. But this year's different because even though I know I'll be releasing the 5th book of my YA series, I have other books that I could launch, but I also really want to do a special edition, as I was said a little earlier. So I may hold off on the new things so I can concentrate and maybe do the special edition justice because if I'm spending the money on all the character art and the new covers and all that, I want to make sure I let as many people know about it as I can.
Yeah, I think that outside of editing, the cover art has been the biggest expense that I've found. But it's just, a good cover, it does a lot for the book. I just, I couldn't imagine me trying to create the covers that I have. It's just, it was worth the investment to have somebody do that for me and really give the book life.
Oh yes, and because even though people always try to say don't judge a book by a cover, but we all do.
That's when I go into a bookstore
Not
and
an
look at
attractive
books.
cover. There's very little reason for you to pause and look at it a little further, and so it's that unfortunate thing. Cause there could be like fantastically amazing, game-changing books out there that just unfortunately have not so great covers.
Yeah, and it's really that, like, it's what draws you in to actually pick up the book, and we shouldn't judge it by the cover, but it's hard not to.
What we do. We all want pretty covers. We want those eye-catching covers. It's just, I think, a part of who we are. Sorry, I have the little slider saying, "Hey, guess what? We have reached an hour, so that's cool." But yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, last question. Last of my three main questions I always ask, and this goes for anybody listening in as well. But for you, Ron, is there anything that you wanted to talk about topic-wise that we never covered, or questions you wanted to ask that you didn't get a chance to ask, or even announcements?
I think outside of Poetry Book will be out there on April 1st. It is available for pre-order on Kindle now, so I know that is there. And I will probably be reaching out to the community in the next week or so to look for ARC readers.
Well, very nice. And yes, if anybody who listening and has no idea what an ARC reader is, it's in the bookish community, it means advanced reader copy, and it means the author will send you a free copy in advance of publication with the hope that the hopefully unspoken deal that you will leave an honest review upon publication. So they're great. We appreciate, as an author, we appreciate all the ARC readers and anybody who actually helps us along, and that's great. I had a question put it in the comments for us. What is our favorite aspect of world building?
I think it's creative, the creative freedom. You have that chance to make a world the way you see it, the way you want it. There's no boundaries that says you can't do this. I think that's my favorite part of it is just being able to break all the boundaries, all the rules that exist, and just say, here's this world. Let's make it completely abstract and different than the way anybody else would think of it.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful way to put it. And I know for me, it changes every time. Every series, every book, everything changes. But right now I'm actually in the process of world building for 2 future series. Again, it's just the way I am. I want to take multiple projects at the same time. Don't recommend it, but I do. It's just really neat when this loose concept in the back of your head finally takes some kind of rigidity, and all of a sudden you have this world that as authors we see, we hear, we all engage all our senses in, that comes to life before our eyes. And it's just that kind of wow factor that we went from nothing to something. And it is this wow factor. And I kind of been glancing across the way because I've been loosely working on a world map for one of these future series. And it is so neat when things kind of fall in line and I can kind of see this world developing and then know the cultures that are coming out of it and the creatures and the characters. As an epic high fantasy person, all the entities that appear. It's such a neat experience.
When you can start to see it and feel it has its own sense of realism to it, that's the part I enjoy, especially in the writing as well. It's just, as I'm writing, the world develops and also the characters, like, they start becoming real to me. Like, I can picture kind of what they're looking like, what they're doing, how their conversations are going, and that's how you kind of, I develop more. Like, the first draft, I don't always get all of that, but when I start doing the editing, I really dig into that, and it's like, oh no, this person wouldn't look that way. They would do this instead.
Yeah, because they do a good. A well-written character is, dimensional for a reason. They have their personality, they have their quirks, and they have their the way they see the world, the way they think. And as authors, we're supposed to, know when a character's not acting the way they actually should. Because if you build out those real characters, just like people, they view and they react to the same situations differently, all depending on their backstory and who they are intrinsically. And it's wild because we create all these people.
You make people that weren't people.
We made people that weren't people. Yes, we did. Or sometimes monsters and creatures, or however you view them, they don't have to be people, but
entities.
Entities. Yeah, I use that word a lot because I do have a lot of characters that are entities. Yes. They're not humans. I'm trying to think. No, the Guardian Speaker deals with predominantly humans, but I was like, my other series, I was going to say there are a lot of entities. Non-human character, main character. Is that NHMC, non-human main character.
Cousins of the NPC.
Oh man, I love that. Okay, so yeah, we're reached the end of the hour. If anybody else has any questions for us, let us know. But I just want to say, Ron, thank you for coming out and talking with me this afternoon. It's been so nice to get to meet you and kind of talk to you face to face and learn more about your books. And that is so exciting that you're gearing up to complete a series, which is such a satisfying thing when it's done, because it may not be done. Done. And and I hope, wish you best for your poetry collection, because that is, again, such a very different way of approaching writing. And multi-talented.
Well, thank you so much, Katharine. I appreciate you having me on. It's been great chatting with you.
And if you ever want to do one of these, again, I plan them in advance, as you now know. And feel free to come back on after you publish a poetry book or you're a third of your series, and love to talk to you some more.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
Everybody who's been hanging out today, thank you, and appreciate your time. Bye.
Thanks, y'all.